You know, some days you just walk into a place thinking nothing bad's going to happen, and suddenly you realize you're living in a nightmare. You can't just wake up from that's how it started for me. That morning in the Southridge County Courthouse, where the light barely crept through the dusty windows, and the only thing thicker than the air was the silence, broken up now and then by heels clicking down the hallway. Folks trying to mind their own business, eyes locked to the floor because no one wants trouble. You know what I mean? I remember clutching that yellow folder with my school's name on it, my hands sweaty, my heart racing, trying not to let anyone see just how scared I was. 15 years old, and somehow, right in the middle of a mess I never asked for, waiting for my name to be called, and wishing more than anything that my dad could be there, but knowing he couldn't because duty took him away so often. And that's when I met Officer Brandt. Brandt, the kind of cop who didn't need to say much for you to get the message. The kind who could make you feel like you'd done something wrong just by breathing too loud, leaning back against the wall, arms crossed, staring at me with that look, you know, the one like I was guilty before I ever opened my mouth. "What are you looking at?" he asked, his voice just low enough to make me flinch, and for a second I thought maybe if I just stayed quiet, he'd back off, but instead he just got closer, repeating the question like it was an order, like there was only one answer that wouldn't get me into more trouble. I kept my head down, didn't say a word, tried to disappear into the wall, but he just kept on, muttering something about public schools and kids who could fake innocence. And that's when I realized it didn't matter what I said, I'd already lost. When the courtroom door creaked open and they finally called my name, I swear my heart just about stopped. Everything felt like it was moving in slow motion, like the whole world was watching to see if I'd crack. I walked inside, feeling every eye on me, sat down at the witness table, the judge, the lawyers, the court reporter, all those adults with their titles and their power, and there I was, just a kid with a file and nobody to back me up. They started firing questions, one after another, wanting every detail, but it didn't matter how honest I tried to be. Every word I said was twisted, cut off, corrected, until I barely recognized my own voice. And through it all, Brandt just stood there, right by the wall, tapping his belt, not saying much, but making sure I knew he was watching, making sure I felt small. It wasn't just the words that hurt, it was the way nobody did anything when he started in on me. Answer. Or are you going to keep pretending to be the poor kid like you did outside? He growled, loud enough for everyone to hear, but nobody objected, nobody wrote it down, nobody even looked up, like this was just the way things were supposed to go. My hand started shaking so bad, I almost dropped my file, my mouth dry, eyes burning from the lights overhead, and every time I tried to explain, they acted like I was lying, like I was making it all up. They kept demanding to know who started the fight, pressing for a name, just one name, but I couldn't give them what they wanted because I didn't know. I just saw a bunch of kids shoving, and then one fell, and that's all I could say. I tried to ask if I could wait for my dad, or at least a lawyer, but the judge just kept tapping her pen, the attorneys trading glances, and Brandt stepped in even closer, his voice dropping to a cold whisper. "Your dad also skips his duties like you, huh?" For a second, I wanted to yell, to scream, but all I could do was look back at him. And maybe that look was enough because he turned away, just for a heartbeat, told the court reporter to strike his words from the record, and still nothing changed. You could feel the room holding its breath, waiting for me to mess up, for me to say something wrong. And when the school attorney leaned in and demanded again, "Just give me a name," the pressure was so thick I thought I might choke. And then it happened. Brandt's hand rose, faster than I could react, and the slap rang out so loud it echoed off the walls, knocking me sideways in my chair, scattering my papers everywhere. For a second, nobody moved. A woman from the back row yelled out, "What the hell did you just do?" But even she stopped when Brandt shot her a glare, cold as ice. Nobody picked me up. Nobody asked if I was all right. The judge just bowed her head and told everyone to maintain order, as if nothing had happened, as if I was invisible, and the only thing that mattered was getting back to business. My cheeks stung, the blood welling up, but what hurt more was the silence, the way every adult in that room chose to say nothing, the way their silence felt like permission for what had just happened. You ever realize in a single moment that the place you thought was supposed to keep you safe, to give you justice, is the same place that can break you and not even blink? That's what I felt, sitting there, the word witness staring up at me from the subpoena, a cruel joke because I didn't have a voice. All I had was a story nobody wanted to hear. The trial rolled on, questions hammering me from every side, my answers ignored or twisted, and when I couldn't say what they wanted, Brant ordered me again, louder, answer now, and when I finally said, I don't know, that's when the slap came, a sound sharp enough to make the whole room stop, but not sharp enough to wake anyone up. Maybe you think this is where the story ends, with a kid left bleeding in a courtroom full of people too afraid or too indifferent to speak up, but that's not what happened. The door at the back swung open with a metallic crash, and every head snapped around to look, and there, in the doorway, stood my father, tall, broad-shouldered, his suit sharp as a razor, his eyes cold, scanning the room with the kind of focus that makes everyone sit up straight. He didn't say anything at first, just walked down the aisle, the court reporter's pen frozen in midair, and when he stopped between me and Brant, the whole room went dead quiet. He didn't shout, didn't wave his arms, just asked one question, clear and steady. Why did you assault my son? You could see Brant's mask slip for a second, that arrogance replaced by something like fear, but he still tried to act tough. This is a restricted area. Get out before I... And then my dad pulled out his badge, flashed it in the light, and everyone knew things had just changed. Special Agent Jamal Pierce, FBI. You just committed a serious crime. And just like that, the whole balance of power in the room shifted. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed, waiting to see what would happen next. My dad didn't let up. He laid it all out, step by step, his voice calm, making sure everyone heard every word. You hit a minor, in front of a judge, a prosecutor, attorneys, and a court reporter. That's not just wrong. That's a federal crime. The judge tried to regain control, but it was too late. The silence was too heavy, and every phone in the room was suddenly recording, every lawyer suddenly aware that they might be witnesses themselves. For the first time, Brant didn't have an answer. The judge told everyone to stay seated. My dad started recording, saying he was filing a report right there, and all at once, nobody wanted to be the one left standing on the wrong side. And you know what? The real twist wasn't just that my dad had the power to call out what everyone else ignored. It was that the entire session had been recorded, every shout, every insult, every slap by the court reporters like no one paid attention to. That evidence, the words, the violence, the silence went out into the world within hours. The video, the audio, the story, all of it. And suddenly it wasn't just my problem anymore. It was the country's. That clip of me getting slapped and my dad storming in went viral. People saw it. They heard the words, and they started to ask the questions nobody in that room had dared to ask out loud. If this can happen here, in the open, with cameras and witnesses, what else is happening in the shadows? Within days, there were protests, petitions, news anchors talking about the slap heard around the nation, not just because it was violent, but because of the silence that followed it, the kind of silence that's worse than the crime itself. My name became a hashtag, Justice for Malik. But the bigger story was about all the kids who never had someone walk in for them, who got slapped, hurt, silenced, and left alone. Reporters dug into Brant's past, uncovered old complaints buried by the system, and finally, people started to listen to voices that had always been ignored. You'd think maybe the system would just try to sweep it under the rug, another scandal, another officer on administrative leave, but that's not what happened, not this time. Under pressure from the community, human rights groups, and my dad's lawsuit, the state brought in an outside investigator, Rhonda, a woman who'd made her name calling out corruption and misconduct, the kind of person Brant had never imagined would be sitting across the table from him. She found what everyone in Southridge already knew. It wasn't just one cop. It was the whole system, layer after layer of silence and cover-up, going back years. And when the trial finally happened, Brant had to sit in the same seat he'd watched so many kids sit in before this time. It was him on defense, accused of not just assaulting me, but abusing his power of making the courtroom a place of fear, not justice. The judge didn't let him squirm out. The old complaints, the video, the voices that had once been silenced, all piled up. When the verdict came down, 5 years in prison, no probation, a recommendation for review of every case Brant had ever touched, there was no applause, just a heavy, exhausted kind of relief, the kind that says, finally, someone answered, even if it's not enough. A lot of people wanted to know if I forgave him, if I was healed, if everything was okay now that he was gone. But when a reporter finally asked, I just said the only thing that felt real: I don't need to forgive, I need change. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about every kid who's ever been told to stay quiet, who's been slapped in silence, who's watched adults look away instead of standing up. That's the thing I learned through all this. It's not the violence that sticks with you. It's the silence after, the message that nobody's going to help if you don't matter to them. And maybe, just maybe, that's changing now. My face ended up on posters, in a guidebook called Know Your Rights. My dad's words became a rallying cry, and the city finally started making changes, banning solo officers from running juvenile hearings, holding new training for cops about the real harm silence can do. But there's still a long way to go. I still walk through the world a little more careful, a little less trusting, but I'm not alone anymore, and that makes all the difference. So if you're listening, if you ever find yourself in a room where the right thing is clear, but everyone's staying quiet, remember what happened here. Ask yourself, are you the kind of person who'll just watch? Or will you be the one who finally stands up and says, enough? Don't let the silence win. Share your thoughts below. Is justice really justice if it only protects the powerful? Or is it time we all start making some noise?